In 1859, a Missouri gold miner came across a valley with majestic mountains and plenty of open land. The miner was Joel Estes, and he had just discovered the valley that would soon bear his name. The first of Estes Park's permanent residents was William E. James. In the spring of 1875, along with his wife Edna and 3 young sons, Homer, Charles, and baby Howard, James had staked a claim on the land that would in time become home to the Elkhorn Lodge. Though James had no intention of building a lodge to house guests. With a portion of the Fall River flowing through the property, it had its own water supply and plenty of grazing land for cattle. Because of the surrounding beauty and fresh, clean air, many people wandered onto the property during the summer months and begged to stay a while. But with only the tiny house James had built for his family, there was nowhere for these outdoor-loving people to stay, so tents were pitched for temporary lodging. The following winter, James decided to build cabins for the guest he knew would be returning with the warm weather. As word got around, more and more people would show up at the ranch expecting accommodations. So each winter another cabin would be built to house them. James soon figured out that catering to adventure-seeking tourists was much more lucrative than raising cattle, and so the Elkhorn Lodge Guest Ranch was born. After raising 3 boys, Edna and James were delighted with the new addition to their family. On January 6, 1880, William and Edna were blessed with a daughter. They named her Eleanor. Eleanor loved life at the lodge, exploring every inch of the property, climbing Man Mountain, and riding her beloved horses. The James family became close friends with many of the early guests. So much so, in fact, that one generous guest even started the first school in Estes Park for the James boys. With very few children in the park, one of the 3-room cabins on the Elkhorn property was used for the schoolhouse.
Elkhorn Lodge is a very special place because it's the last of the old lodges, old tourist lodges in this part of Colorado. Estes Park is a place where much of Colorado's tourist history was born and matured, and this is the last surviving remnant of a remarkable era in our local history and in our state's history as well. A good deal of it's authentic, which is really interesting. In fact, you can take a look at the early photographs and chart the development of the lodge from the earliest beginnings in the early 1870s to the main lodge in 1900. The first schoolhouse in Estes Park is here. We also have a building called the Chapel, which is a wonderful example of Western stick architecture.
As the James children reached adulthood, Homer went off to the University of Colorado to obtain his medical degree, while Howard helped out with the lodge. Charles was not as fortunate. He contracted a deadly virus that would end his life at the young age of 20. Eleanor married a Dutch nobleman named Peter Hondius, and they had a son.
I grew up at the Elkhorn. It was the family homestead. My grandfather, I understand, got in here in 1876, I believe, and started building the ranch house, the original old lodge, and they were trying to run cattle like everyone else up here, and they gradually shifted over to the tourist business. People came up and wanted to have a meal, have a bed, and look at the scenery, and it turned out that this was going to be a bigger thing than the cattle ever would be, so they added, as they went, they added units to the lodge and wound up with the buildings the way they are now. My mother was working here with the family and ran the office, and my Uncle Howard died in about 1929, I think it was. My mother wound up running the thing during the Depression, and she sold it about 1940 to my uncle's estate, and my cousin took it over, and he ran it until about 1958, I think it was. This area, the building, and this part of the main lodge is the kitchen part, and it was coal-fired stoves and originally, and refrigeration was ice. You cut it on the ponds in the winter into blocks, 200-pound blocks, and store it in the ice house. Twice a week, we had to put about 10 200-pound blocks up there to keep the thing refrigerated. This is a favorite place of my childhood, the barn. It grew up here, and we had usually about 65 head of horses, sometimes up to 100 and sometimes somewhat fewer, but most of them during the main season, they went out every day, and the typical thing for a guest was to either take a sack lunch, which they got from the lodge, and take an all-day trip, or go half-day and come back to have lunch at the lodge and then do whatever they were doing in the afternoon. Elkhorn property was both sides of the river, from the road on over, and about halfway up Old Man Mountain there, and it was a great place. We'd be up and back with the horses, playing cowboys and Indians. If you stay on bareback, you got to be an Indian, otherwise you had to be a cowboy.
We bought this from the James family. They were the ones who it was a ranch, and so we bought it from them. They had already developed it into a resort. Old Man Mountain has been a very popular place. Most people thought it was publicly owned. Well, it really isn't. It's privately owned, most of it, but there's some caves up there and trails and things. It's a sacred mountain from the Indians, so there were a lot of artifacts up there, and it's a wonderful place.
Estes Park was well known for its large elk population and drew hunters from miles around, but the demand soon became greater than the supply, and the abundant elk herds dwindled to the point of extinction. By 1897, notices were posted throughout the park banning fishing and hunting without permission.
Well, my father was involved in reintroducing the elk about 1913, and there was a kind of a letter from Stanley congratulating him on getting the pass going, and saying that he doesn't think much of having the elk because there'll be too many of them and I'll have to get Teddy Roosevelt up to shoot them out.
In 1909, the Estes National Park and Game Preserve was created, now known as Rocky Mountain National Park. There were also many well-known guests who enjoyed respite at the Elkhorn. Among them, F.O. Stanley, inventor of the Stanley steamer. Like so many others, Stanley came to Colorado to remedy his tuberculosis. He stayed in a cottage on the Elkhorn property for a few months and saw his health improve so dramatically that he decided to make Estes Park his home. In 1907, he began construction of the luxurious Stanley Hotel.
There was a lot of square dancing around, and Ed was a square dance caller, and so we not only had balls in the ballroom, but we had some square dances too, and still do. There were the spring-loaded, they're railroad ties. I'm not an engineer, I don't understand the physics of it, but they say it's spring-loaded, and that's why there's a little bit of give, and it's one of the few, I guess, spring-loaded floors that are still around.
The Elkhorn was also home to Colorado's first golf course.
They played golf on these hills. We didn't know that until last summer. The casino building was originally built in 1890 and served as the clubhouse for what we believe is the first golf course in Estes Park.
It's one of the very oldest, one of the very first of the resorts.
What historic preservation is all about, it's about memory. It's about our collective memory as human beings and Americans and people who honor and respect our past. If we lose the Elkhorn Lodge, if we lose any historic building, our memory is just reduced that much more. And so that's why the whole issue of historic preservation is so important. There are other reasons as well, but it's a matter of human memory, and it's also a matter of community pride.
The Elkhorn Lodge is the oldest continuously operating hotel in Colorado. It's been added to the National Register of Historic Places, as well as Colorado's Most Endangered list. Thanks to the hard work of some dedicated people, this amazing property will continue to beckon vacationers and adventure seekers alike for another 136 years. The fresh air, the breathtaking views, and the history that lies within these walls is all anyone needs to get lost in a simpler time, a time in the early Colorado Rockies.
This is a very remarkable place.
I'm tired of moving on, and everything I do is wrong. So tired of broken hearts and broken homes. What the hell are we fighting for? I can't do this anymore. I thought you were forever. I thought you were forever. I thought you were forever. I guess this is forever. I'm tired of coming home to all the games you play. I'm sick of working hard. You sit and waste away. I'm ready to lose it all. Play broke and walk away. I want to drink it all away.
Thank you.